Hello, and thank you for joining our session today. It's June 19. I'm Brendusha Kevorkian, your host for the Practitioner Forum today. I will be joined by Steve Anderson, and we have two topics we will be focusing on today. It's a drill down of capabilities added in the 2019-05 release. On consuming studio applications as well as modular package manager. So best practices session, we provide guidance on SMAX out-of-the-box processes, integrations, and tool capabilities. The goal here is to achieve a common understanding of principle and terminology that SMAX is using and help you get the most from the suite, as well as share use cases and best practices. We will be starting today with consuming studio applications and how this is now used with the self-service portal, in particular the catalog. So just going back to best practices for creating studio applications in general, what is very important is to take the time to design and plan the application. Don't rush into the implementations, because if you do that, then you sometimes have to go back and adjust the design, and that's more complicated than just starting and planning, and then once you're done, actually moving into the implementation. What is important is to define the data model up front, work with your users, your community, the people who will be your consumers of the application. Make sure you define the data model up front. The field naming convention, try using something consistent. The key field names, right, won't be able to be changed, and then as well as many-to-many relations cannot be deleted later. Decide if you need a primary key for your entity, as this cannot be changed later, and same for the workflow meta phases. While phases can be changed, the meta phases are locked once the record type has been created. Decide as well if you plan to activate the enable custom entity link to support out-of-the-box entities, and this is available under the administration application settings. It will allow you to control what type of entity links can be added to an entity. Add the relevant roles, right? By default, tenant admins can see and use the new entities, but not other users. So make sure you have the relevant roles defined and permissions, and they are assigned to people who need to take advantage of the capabilities you're adding. Decide as well if the application needs to be accessed from the service catalog. Create the relevant offerings, and we'll drill down more in this presentation what does that mean. And last but not least, I encourage you all to review the studio best practices documentation we have recently added into the practitioner notes section of our item practitioner documentation. Okay, so before we actually go into the slides, I'm going to switch to a quick demo because it's always nice we start with the demo, and then we'll come back to the slides and look at how we set it up. So we have here in this May release, we have configured a travel application. It does have some basic capabilities added, and I'm just going to switch to the studio and show what we defined in there. So in terms of the fields, we do have some information about when the person is traveling, so the traveler, right, when we have a start date, a departure date, a return date, where is it traveling from, where is it going. We have a business justification, information about an estimated cost, and then later on, once the person returns from the trip, they can submit the actual cost, the expense report reference, and then when it was submitted. So all that can be tracked. So that's just the basic setup. We do have obviously the forms, right, where we put information about the travel itself and the cost, just structured. And then in terms of the processes, it's just a main phase where the travel record is active, and then once the traveler is back, submits the record, the entry moves into the close state. So we'll not go into the details of this because the focus here is on the portal, but I just wanted to introduce the application. So now moving back to the portal, let's try to submit an application for a travel request, and hopefully we'll get approved. So we have an offering to submit, and with some information in here. So let's say I'm planning to do a training for the field. So I'm gonna submit a request, SMAX training for partners in Europe. Let's say we're gonna select the type of the travel, which in this case is field and partner. I'm leaving from San Diego, and I'm traveling, let's say, where should we have the training? Let's do in London. And I'm gonna leave, let's say, on July 1st and coming back on the 5th. And I estimate my travel cost, $3,000. And we'll put a justification here. So we submitted the request. We do have an approval on it, and just for making this quick, I actually added myself as the approver, and we'll just do a quick approver here. And submit. Okay, so as you can see, the request has been automatically fulfilled once approved, right? And if I go here, actually it's showing as closed. So, and we'll go into the details on why this is closed, but you can see how quickly this went through. So I didn't have to do anything on the agent side to process it except for the approval, but that can be done from the portal by the approver. So now let's do the same. Let's say it's not just me going, but I also, I mean, Steve as well needs to help me with the training. So I'm just now requesting a travel approval on behalf of Steve. Let's say Steve is busy and he asked me to do it. I'm set as his delegate, so I'm just going to do the same thing here. So Steve will do the same thing, and Steve is in San Diego as well. So we'll put, but let's put something different. Let's say Steve is traveling to San Francisco for another event, and then he's leaving from San Francisco. Just so, and then we're still going to London, and then we'll do the same thing. And then he found a cheaper flight. And we'll submit. Okay, so I'm going to get out of the on behalf mode, and I'm going to approve Steve's travel as well. Okay, so now let's just go to the travel application, and then we'll see. So you see, I refreshed it, and we got two new entries in here. Travel for Partners by Steve, we just submitted, and then as well the one I submitted, SMAX training for partners, right? So they're both in here. They are in planned mode because you know they're not in progress, right? So they stay in plan for a while until the workflow will change to in progress, but they are in here. So now let's say fast forward 2 weeks later, and both Steve and I are back from traveling, and we need to submit our expense report. So we come back here, and so first I'm going to submit my expense report. And what I have in here, actually, you know, I have a list of active travel records because I've done a number of trips, and now it's time to update. So let's pick the one we just submitted earlier, SMAX training for partners. So you can see I was able to retrieve this. So the expense report, let's say I submitted my expense report, 3, 4, 5. I estimated 3,000, but it was only 2,600. And then let's say I submitted this today, and then I hit submit. So now let's go back and see what happened to my trip. So you can see the actual cost was updated. And if I go here, you see the expense report and the expense submitted date, right? So the fulfillment plan took care of the updates on its own, so I didn't have to worry about it. Okay, so now let's just go back for a minute and switch again to Steve. So request on behalf, so switching to Steve as the requester, and I'm going to submit his expense report as well. So as you can see here, you know, from my drop-down list, I'm actually not seeing my request, but I'm seeing Steve's request, right? So that's the one, the training for partners. I know his expense report number, and his cost was 2,700. He actually underestimated, and let's just put the date today as well. Okay, and then if I go back here, you see the update has taken place, right? So the flow works. The two offerings we exercise do their job, and I was able to do both the request for myself as well on behalf of Steve. So now let's say what happened behind the scenes and how the offerings were defined. So we'll start with the submit travel request. So this is where we create the travel record. So we've added a number of user options in here, right? The travel purpose, the travel type. You know, we have a number of string user options. We have a number of date user options, as well as numerical values. So in terms of the fulfillment plan, what we have is we have an approval. So I've done here just a simple one, right? There is no need for an exceptional approval. So it just went on the notepad, and this one had myself hard-coded, but obviously, you know, you are all familiar with how the approval process works. You can create groups, you can have expressions, so you know, you can have the manager approve. There could be a delegate, so all that is in place and working. Now let's look at the fulfillment plan. So the first task is the creation of the travel record, and for this we used the business rule to create a new record. So I'm creating the record of type travel, and here are a number of fields that we will be automatically populating, and we're doing this by copying the different user options into the relevant fields on the travel record. So in this case, the departure date, the travel type, and so on. The traveler is the requested for person, the arranger is the requested by person, and so on. And then we have a second business rule, which does populate the completion code as well as the solution, which then allows the workflow to go through and move into the accept phase. But we wanted to go even further, so for this we put some default values in place, and one in particular the service desk group, and with this we actually allowed the workflow to automatically progress from the creation phase, right, in the log, to in this case the approval. And then as well, we check the skip end user acceptance box, which then the workflow does not stop into the accept phase. Actually, there is a different path. It goes into the closure because we don't really need the requester to accept the solution. It's really, the request is there just as a vehicle to create the travel record. Okay, so that's the creation. Now let's take a look at the update offering. So in this case, we have a number of user options. We have the expense report, we have the expense report amount and the submit date. What is more important, actually, we have this travel record, which is an entity link, right? So this is something new that came with the May release. And it allows for much more flexibility in defining the offerings and being able to access, I would say, records from other entity types, right, without having to explicitly add them as regular fields on the request. The same thing in the task plan. We have we don't need approvals in this case, right? We have two tasks, 2 automated tasks. The first one is the update of the travel record, right? So, and for this I'm using a business rule of type update fields on related records. The mapping very similar to what we had in the previous one. One thing to note in this case is because the travel record, it's not really a related record on the request, so it doesn't show up as an entity link. If you actually look at this drop-down list, it will not show up in this drop-down list because it's not an entity link. So what you have to do is switch to function mode, right, and actually enter the name of the record type in there, and that will allow you to define the business rule. Okay. And then we have the similar automated closure as we showed before, so very similar. We have the default values in the tab, which allows the population of the relevant field to ensure the record goes through to closure phase directly without agent intervention. And one thing in particular I want to show for the rules, you saw when we tried to select the record to update, I did not see all the travel records in the tool. I actually showed just my own, I saw just my own, and this is because I created this rendering rule, and I'm filtering on requested for person, and I also filtering on just the active records. Okay, so that's really the demo. So I'm gonna move this browser out, and then let's just switch back to the slides and just go over a quick recap of what I showed. So we have mainly I would say two classes of offerings. In this case, it's more about the creation of a custom record, and then the update of an existing custom record, right? So linked to the Studio app. The same thing obviously applied to the out of the box, but that's maybe not that common, right? You do that, so let's just go with the custom records in this case. So the main task is the creation of the offerings, put the basic information there, select the service definition, put it in active phase, then configure the relevant user options. We also saw the new entity link type in 2019-05, configure the approval plan, if needed, configure the task plan, make sure everything is automated so it moves through and you don't have to have a user intervention. Configure the business rules as needed. We showed the rendering rule, and configure the default values and automate the ticket flow. We didn't look at the roles. We'll look at that in a minute after we go through this recap. So the two record types, right? Create the record business rule, and then the second phase. Then we talked about the update, right? So that's more for your reference. The rendering rule. And one thing I'm going to move back to the slides and show now. So how we've been able to do that. So in this case, I was a tenant admin, right? So no problem for me to access the travel record. But technically, if you just have an end user, if you don't do anything and you come in here and try to update an expense report like here, when you try to get the list from the drop-down list, you'll actually get an error message that the user does not have permission to view this record type. So for that, what we need to do is actually configure a role, right? And these are end users, so we don't want to give them too much access. So what we did is we took the out-of-the-box self-service portal user role, which is a locked role, and we created a clone one. And the only thing we did is we added the travel record, and we added view permission on the travel record. So this is the only thing we had to do. Now, with that said, it's fine. We have the new role. The problem is we don't really want to have to manually add those roles to every user we have. So the way to deal with this, actually, under the workflow. So I'm going to switch back to the person workflow. And what we had to do is, after applying changes, add a business rule, which allows us to add a role to a person, right? And it's just a quick check. If the role does not exist after an update or at the creation of the user, we add the role. So obviously this applies to new users. Or if you already have the application in place, then you have to do some sort of a bulk update of the users, which then will trigger the workflow to run and update the role. Or if you have a process in place already and you use Managed Person API or connected, you can as well use that option to add the roles. Okay, so we have this in here, and with that said, the last slide I have here is the default values, right? So again, important to populate the service desk group, which triggers the population of current assignment, and then as well the set skip end user acceptance to true, which will allow the closure without acceptance. So with that said, we wrapped up the first section. Steve or Tony, are there any questions we should take now?
There aren't any questions in the question panel. I don't know if we want to take people off mute and see if anybody wants to comment verbally.
We can, or
so I unmute all participants. Yes, so I have unmuted you. If you have a comment or a question for Brenusa on the first section of the session today, please come off mute and ask. I'll give you a couple seconds because you do have to unmute yourself after I've given you permission. If you are trying to and it's not working, you can add a question in the question panel and let us know that you're having trouble getting off mute. Or, of course, you can use the question panel to submit a question. All right, what, I'm not seeing, oh, I see a question just came in. Give me a second. Can the rendering rule obtain conditions based on more than one table only? Contain. Can the rendering rule contain conditions based on more than one table? Are you following the question, Brenusa? I seem to have lost my speaker. My microphone is working, but I'm probably not hearing you. I'm going to go on mute.
Oh,
and try
I was on mute, so I can hear you, Steve.
Oh, okay. It looks like...
I'm trying to understand the use case because really we're trying to...
Yeah, if you could clarify the use case of what you're trying to do, that might make it easier for us to answer the question. So, like, want to filter travel record for users which are in a certain department. So that would just be, you don't need to filter on more than one table. Exactly. You're just filtering on the user's department. So that's kind of two levels, and I believe that would be possible.
I think so, yeah. I think that should be possible, yes. Yep.
You will get to, if you try to follow the entity link trail for far enough, you will run into a limit. You cannot go an infinite number of jumps through entity links. You can't go from the request to the person, to the department, to the location, to the owner of the location, to the, you can't just keep going forever, but.
Yep, one level should be fine, yes. Yeah. Okay.
So you're filtering travel records. You're not filtering the user records. You're filtering the travel records based on an attribute of the user record for the example that you gave. So I want to filter travel records for users which are in a certain department. You end up with a list of travel records. So in terms of a limitation in the SM portal user option, so this is not Service Manager. It uses a completely different system for user option. So it's and we have a true relational model here, which makes your use case possible.
Okay. Good.
Understood. Okay. Got a new question. will custom modules I built before 2019-05 be available for export once I update to 2019-05, or will I need to rebuild them?
Let's wait until Steve
That's a
goes.
great segue into the second part of the session.
Okay. Steve, do you want to share or you want me to keep going?
I'll go ahead and share because I'm going to flip back and forth between deck and...
Okay, let me stop showing the screen, and I'm going to make you the presenter. Oh, you are the presenter. Okay.
Yeah, I took
okay.
it.
Okay.
Right.
Go ahead.
All right. So you should be seeing my screen. You should see a SMAX system in the background and the deck in the foreground.
Yes.
All right. I'm going to stay in this mode for a second because I'm going to switch. All right. Focus on modular package management. The first thing I want to share is an updated actual screenshot instead of a mock-up of the apps on the marketplace. So you can see here on the ITOM marketplace, we have posted two.
If you may want to go in full mode.
I will in a second.
Okay.
I will in a second. Okay. I know I'm going to switch in a second. That's why I'm not. So we have posted two apps on the marketplace. If I go over here to my system or to my browser, I've gone to the root of the ITOM marketplace. So marketplace.microfocus.com, ITOM. And then if you come here and you go to Service Management Automation, you will get to all of the content for SMA. And you'll notice that we've done a little bit of reorganizing, and there's a new SMAX Studio Apps subcategory, I guess I'll call it. I don't remember what the official term is. So the SMAX Studio apps, so we have two apps posted. We have the security operations, and we have a capacity management for SMAX. Both of those are posted. You can download those for free and load them into your dev system or test system and check them out. All right. Wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. So that is something that Rendusa could choose to do with her travel app that she's created. She could use our new modular package management capability to export her changes, her configurations for the new travel app, and then post them on the ITOM marketplace under the SMAX Studio Apps section. So modular package management, if you watched the release readiness webinar, and hopefully you did, this will be a recap of that. And I'll do a live demo rather than a recorded one. I'll show you a little bit of it. But so this is an evolution of an improvement of our old dev to prod process and allowing you to package a single module or app or multiple at the same time. And one of the things that we want to do with this is, as I showed you, be able to build something, export the definition of it, and share it with others, either directly or through the ITOM marketplace as we have for that security operations and capacity management applications. As part of that that work, we've made some improvements that kind of more general improvements in dev to prod process. So one of those is that we've removed the limitation for package management that it must be within the same SMAX farm. So if you export from one farm, now it's supported to import into a different farm. Of course, that's useful if you have separated your development farm from your production farm. Those are two different farms. Now it's supported to export and import across those. So very useful in just single customer scenarios, not related to application sharing. But it definitely was critical for us to be able to support the use case that we wanted to around being able to build something, export it, and share it on the marketplace, because when somebody downloads it, they're obviously not going to be importing it into the same farm where it was created. And then in addition to being able to create something new and share it, it also allows customers to move only part of their, have multiple configuration streams going on in a single development tenant. And say you're configuring multiple modules, you have some configuration on incident management going, configuration on problem management going, you can choose that maybe your configurations for problem management are completed, but your incident ones are still ongoing. You can now choose to export just the changes for problem management, load those into your test and then into your production, leave the changes for incident management behind. You don't have to move them as an entire unit as you did before. That does mean you need to be a little bit more diligent about understanding the relationship between your changes. If you make a change in problem that relies on something you've changed in incident, because those processes are interlinked, you probably want to move them at the same time. If your changes in the problem module are independent, then you should be able to move them safely. So it's just standard implementation best practices, understand the relationship between the modules and what you can move independently and what you can't. Giving a little bit more control to you, but that also comes with more responsibility. All right. So if we take the marketplace focus, there are two flows. So there's the creator flow and the consumer flow. So what we saw was Brindusa doing the design and configure of the travel application. And what I'll show you next is how to package it. And then I'm not going to show you how to publish it, but then you could go to the ITOM marketplace and publish it. And then the other one is to download it, download something that's on the marketplace, import it, and of course use it. On the import, there will be some manual steps that will typically go with these at this time, and I'll cover that in a little bit. All right. So in package management, so there's the new packages section, and this is where you will create whatever packages you want to define in terms of being able to export sets of configuration that you've done. So we here see an example of a SecOps package v1 and an incident management 1.2 with a versioning just as part of the naming convention of the record. Some details of it, a screenshot here for your reference. So really the meat of it is down here in the content. This is where you add the modules, and then you can select the related entities for that module. And when you add the modules, you get a list of the modules mapping to what you see in the mega menu structure. And then in addition to the packages, we have the option section. So the old option to package and export the entire system is still available if you want to continue with that process. That is the safest and most cohesive way to move your configuration changes. So you could still export and then import the full package. We still have the simulate and import, and this works whether you exported the entire system or based on a package definition, a subset of your configuration changes. Once you have simulated and tested that the package is valid, then you can go ahead and run an actual import. And let me get out of full screen mode and let's go back over here to the system. All right. So if we go into the mega menu, under administration, under utilities, there's packages. And I haven't been on the system, maybe it timed out. All right, so we have our system here now. I'm going to go ahead and create a new package record. So you can see the process, and we'll say this is travel v 1.0. we'll go ahead and save and edit it. So I can add a description here. I can say Reduce's travel app. I mean, this is just to help you organize your packages. So if you have multiple people working in the system, you can describe what it is there and make sure everybody's on the same page. No true functionality behind it. Same with owner group and owner. But down here, if we look under the content section, we have the export configurations. Let's go ahead and add. And we can scroll through and look at all the things in here. So if I wanted to do incident, I could select that. Problem, procurement, release, all of those in here. So we see we have the travel section. So let's go ahead and say travel. If I go ahead and select that, this is a Miller column display that we use in some other areas of the product, so hopefully you're familiar with it. Under the travel module, we only have a single related entity. That's the travel entity that Reduce created. So let's go ahead and save that. That is what we want to export. So I can go ahead and list the objects, and this will give you a summary of what will be included in the export. So we can see we have one entity, travel. We have the forms. We have the full new and preview forms. We have the travel workflow. It also includes any notification templates, custom actions, SLT settings. It also includes the lists or enumerations that are linked to any of the fields that are part of that entity type. So if we go ahead, we can save this as a PDF. If we want to store it, we can go ahead and open that. And it's really just what we're seeing on the screen, but now I can go ahead and store that somewhere and have that as a record of what I'm moving between my systems. Let's go ahead and cancel that. And I'll go ahead and do an export. And the export's completed. This is just a single module, so it's going to export extremely quickly, as you see there. And we can see all the details of what's included. So the metadata, workflow, resources, etc. So 54 total objects. Okay. So that's all it really takes to define a package and do the export. If we went ahead and added something else, if we said, you know what, we also want to do incident management, we can add that, and we can see it's going to do the definition for incidents, models, and tasks. So these are not the actual models themselves. This is the configuration of the model entity in case you've made any changes to that. Same with tasks. If you've made any changes to the task workflow, added task business rules, you may want to include that. If all of your changes are just on the incident table configuration itself, you could go ahead and unselect models and tasks and just move incidents. If we go ahead and save that and we list our objects, you can see now we're going to have quite a bit more in the package. So we have forms, we have all these notification templates as well. More forms, more notification templates, but the same principle. And I can, of course, always go and remove this and save it again. Now, if I want to simulate an import, I can go here to Options, and I can simulate the import. And let's get this one here. And the import does take a little bit longer because we're not just packaging the stuff up and exporting it. We're actually running a number of checks and validations that this is going to be able to import successfully. There are a number of error conditions that you can encounter that are covered in the documentation of the dev to prod process. So we see here we have 54 modified objects, none failed, none skipped, none removed. So that looks all good. We would be ready to go ahead and run a real import if we chose to. All right, so I'm going to exit out of here, go back to the deck, and I want to, okay, that's what I just covered here, the export and import function. Let's go into full screen. Considerations. So there's a few things that you should be aware of as you're approaching the dev to prod process with modular package management. So if you create a new app like Redusa did for travel, that can be created on an earlier version. So for example, the travel app that Redusa created on 2019-05 will be forward compatible. If she posts that on the marketplace, and then after our August release comes out, you download it, you will be able to load that into an August system, or even a later system than that. So it's forward compatible. However, changes to out-of-box modules must stay within the same version. So if you're making changes to incident management and you export from a May release system, you can only load that into another May release system. And that is because we have a number of locked business rules. One of the reasons that we have this restriction, we have locked business rules, and those are updated when you update the system. Those could be updated. And if those are currently still included in the package that you create from, say, export of incident management, and that means that when you load into a newer system, an August release system in the future, you could be bringing old business rules from the May release forward into August, and that could cause the system to no longer function correctly. So we are not able to support that today. You'll see the note at the bottom. Yes, we are looking at improving this in the future, but that's a current restriction. So restriction only on the out-of-box modules, not on new modules you create. Another consideration is that our change to modular package management didn't address what is included in the package. So we're really focused on the package management, either full system or modular has been focused on those elements that are configured through the Studio menu entry. So the fields, the forms, the workflows, the business rules, notifications, there are things that are not included in package management at this time. So one of the most frequently requested, or that I hear a lot, is offerings, being able to export my offerings and move them from my development system, production system. Modular package management doesn't address that yet. Approval definitions are one that appear in Studio, but also are not yet included. So if you create a package and move it to another system, you would need to re-enter any approval definitions that were associated with it. So it's just something to be aware of. And if you go and you look at the security operations module that was posted on the ITOM Marketplace, you'll notice that there are a number of manual steps that still need to be done in addition to loading the package that was posted there. So it looks like I've seen a number of, well, maybe just a couple more questions pop in. So
I would say maybe just a follow-up to the question about will custom modules be built. It's about modules built before 2019-05. That should still work.
It should still work. There should be no reason that something that you configured based on the February release and then you upgrade the system to May, that should be able to be exported just like anything that you created new on the May release. Will there be a guide of some sort for recommended things to export together? I don't think we can provide that guidance because it really depends on what you're changing. So I gave the example of between the incident and problem modules. It really depends on what kind of configuration changes you're making. If you're making changes to something that relies on another configuration that's being done in incident, a configuration change in problem that relies on a configuration change in incident, maybe it's a new required field that you're going to create. When you create the problem and as a new required field and the incident needs to populate that piece of data, then you would need to, of course, do incident and problem together. If your changes are fully isolated and they're to a single module, then you only need to move that. So it's I can't think of any guidance that we can give that would be independent of, that would always apply independent of what kind of configuration changes you're making. And then will the PowerPoint be shared? The recording will be posted. And if anyone wants to come off mute and ask a question, feel free. Otherwise, I will turn it back over to Renusa for the wrap up.
And you can just, yeah, you can keep share. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So if you're here, you probably know about the Practitioner Forum and you have the link. So keep monitoring. We were trying to provide advanced planning for the couple of releases when that is possible. So next release is on July 3rd, and we're planning to do a drill down on Smart Virtual Agent. We're still trying to decide the topic after, and very likely the topic after that, end of July, it's going to be about the next release. So stay tuned for more announcements. They will be posted on the community. Next slide, Steve. So if you have any configuration use cases to share, or you're interested in doing one of those crawl, walk, run examples, let us know. If you also have specific topics you would like to hear more about, and you know, have a session on, please let us know as well. You have my email address on the screen. And with that, a number of useful links to our main documentation, the SMAX community, and then as well the Getting Started and Configuration Guides available on the ITOM Practitioner portal. And as we mentioned, we have just released a number of chapters, in particular around Studio and best practices for building apps, as well as some examples. And I think Tonya also posted a recent update on the community about that, as well as a couple of other interesting articles we've added to our practitioner portal. So any last minute questions, comments, feedback before we wrap up?
No new questions have come in.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your time today.
Thank you, and hope to see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.